Hello, everyone. It is not Hotline League. It's not Line League, as some people say. And we could not get episode 300 this week. Well, we're hoping to do it later on in the week. Mark and I are, but he and I have, we've been in a fight. I'm just kidding. We're fine, but we are trying to figure out timing on it, and it's just been complicated for reasons that I can't get into. And I still wanted to talk about all this crazy off-season stuff, and I know a lot of people have wanted us to do that as well. So I have found two friends who I was playing Magic the Gathering with yesterday and are tangentially related in some way, shape, or form to the broader esports ecosystem to come on and talk to me and do a review of the off-season stuff and share their fascinating opinions. So this is not Line League, and we aren't taking calls, and it's just the three of us talking about it, but we are going to try to go through all this. Let me introduce my guests for the evening. So we have Cubby, who's a Hotline League guest, friend, frequent visitor. How's it going, Cubby?
Not bad. I'm also, you forgot a bottom of the table Magic the Gathering player as well. You
True.
can help me like that.
No, you were. I don't think you got last place, but you got maybe second to
I
last.
went 3-5.
Yes.
So it's not that bad. It's not that bad for showing up.
Yeah. And then we have none other than Croissant, who is, what is your full title now? Because you're both GM and coach, right?
Yeah, I thought it'd be simpler to just say like come up with something hybrid. So my title is strategic director, but I am doing general management responsibilities, and I'll also continue coaching and doing the things I was doing this year.
That
So
energy. And so it sounds like you got to pick your own title.
yeah, yeah, it was definitely like they shot down some of my other titles, like greatest, one of one was workshopped
That's a good one.
title,
Yeah.
you know.
Croissant, who is one of one at NRG, and he's here to coach and general manage and do all these things. No ego involved in that take at all, I'm sure.
Yes, sir.
Well, either way, great to have both of you guys on. I think what we're going to be doing tonight, folks, for the people that are tuning in live, but also for the folks that want to listen VOD, we're going to see if we put it up on audio. I don't know. We have to talk to my audio person and see what they think for the podcast distribution feed and how it'll take it. But we're going to be basically looking over all of the different rosters and talking a little bit about what is there. Almost all of it is announced, and if not, it's basically pseudo announced, or it's out there. So we should be able to talk about everything. And so we'll talk a little bit about that. We'll talk a little bit about the offseason stuff. I will say one of the first things that was very fascinating was as I was assembling this list, I was like, I feel like I'm forgetting two teams. And then I it is the whenever you're making a list of all the different players, which I have done multiple times for different reasons, it is very funny now to see 40 players instead of 50 players. So I don't know. It's just it's a very different time for the league, and I keep forgetting that whenever I see it. But I maybe we could start, Croissant. I'm kind of curious because you had the opportunity to work in this position, doing like GM stuff and all that stuff this off season. What was this like compared to other off seasons that you've been a part of, even if it wasn't necessarily in that GM role?
I think that I've always had a pretty unique role. Um, like on other coaching staffs, I was actually not involved in roster building at all. That was mainly, you know, um, Optic, then Team Liquid, 2020. Like when I came in, I was like, ooh, really excited to work with Doublelift. He's been my idol forever, and then he just retired. And then Tactical came in, and then I really enjoyed working with Eddie, but like I wasn't involved in that process. And then Golden Guardians Academy, me and ThinkGuard joined in like after the roster was all there. And so when he and I joined CLG, we had been very active about, like, we had a broad kind of framework of, yeah, we want to work with, um, you know, a North American talent team, and but we didn't have the roster sorted out actually when me and Thomas joined. It was kind of like, you know, John had, you know, like here's a pool of players, and then me and Thomas went through and we interviewed everyone on the staff that was from CLG the previous year, um, which was like 8 or 9 people, and then we hired out like Tanner was someone I was really interested in working with. Apollo was someone that me and Thomas had gotten to work with a little bit at Golden Guardians, but not very much because he was on the LCS side. And so every offseason, me and Thomas have been very involved in leading interviews with coaching staff and then also with players. Like if we ever wanted to pitch to a player, we would get on a call with them and say, here's why you should come join CLG. This is what we're building. And obviously we had very little movement on the player side over the last 2 years until this past offseason. But yeah, so it was basically I was doing all the same things, except now I'm interfacing with like the other coaches a bit. I'm trying to get the other coaches more involved, get some of their thoughts, and then also just signing paperwork, like doing some basic logistical stuff. Like that was stuff that was actually kind of fun to like get into, and there's always something to do. And so I had a busy like 2 weeks while I was still in Korea waiting for the finals, but then now things have calmed down and we've just been trying to sort out like other tail end stuff like physical therapists, like our data analysis kind of like plans, but
yeah, just like
roster and
the
coaching
rest
staff
of
is
the
sorted.
stuff, I guess, for the team,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, but it's been a good off season so far. So
And as
can't
Numi
complain.
points out, whatever Croissant is talking about Thomas, he's talking about Think Hard, and whatever he's talking about Tanner, he's talking about Demonte. I think people know the Tanner a little bit more than perhaps the Thomas, but those are the folks that he's referring to. I mean, Cubby, what have you thought of the different sort of way that rosters developed during the offseason? Because I know you, like me, you're in a position where you start to hear different things. You start to hear rumors, like where certain players going, etc. What are some of the trends that you think really drove the offseason and the roster decision making this year? Obviously, money was a big one, but
Yeah.
what else are you seeing and or hearing behind the scenes from the way that teams are approaching this stuff?
I mean, first off, like it's impossible not to talk about money, because not only did some like with money, there's always a totem pole, right? With like where teams are. So like there are a lot of moments in every offseason where stuff just gets hung up. Certain hangups could be like, for example, the first one was where JoJo goes, right? Because both C9 and FlyQuest, and just given JoJo as a player, like dominoes are gonna fall once he moves, right?
Yeah, is it always a mid laner? I feel like so often it's a mid laner,
Yeah,
and where I don't
it's
know
been
if
jungle.
you were differently, Croissant, but I feel like it's always that.
I feel like Vulcan and Impact and those types of players
Yeah.
have had this similar impact on off seasons, but yeah, often mid laners. Like I
Yeah,
mean, Perks was that for both EU and NA.
Bjergsen, I assume that year as well, if I recall. But
Yeah.
yeah, but anyway, so
Um,
you were saying JoJo. Sorry, I interrupted.
yeah, so like there's like a lot of things that happen like in off season where, things get hung up. I mean, obviously the weirdest part about this off season was like EG and GG, like they had teams pretty much secured. I don't know exactly what GG's situation was because I heard that like at the time there's like a budget they had, and then more of a like full blown roster they could have gotten with names that people would have been more familiar with, that would have taken less, because like that was the
I mean,
last
they
the
were in
last
the
option.
running for JoJo, and then
They were yeah, at the
one
start, yeah.
random day, I think, I'd heard that the Golden Guardians folks and Arrow and others were just told like, okay, freeze everything for 2 weeks,
Yeah.
and that kind of killed the whole process.
Yeah. But again, that's like one example, right, of like how even a player like JoJo, it can change your team's entire budget even like for the upcoming year. Like just like how aggressive you want to posture. But I think the more interesting ones were just like a couple of the dominoes falling, money, but also a lot of like I'm not that surprised, but a lot of like the new mids are imports. Personally, I didn't feel like mid was the strongest role coming out of challengers, and a lot of the pool was actually cycled out. Whether it was players getting a chance like APA and Insanity, who both deserve their spot in LCS and earned it, or unfortunately players like Copy, who I know that like Croissant had under him for a little bit, leaving too. Who's a really talented player, and just like given what happened, he decided to call it quits as well. So I think it's gonna take a little bit more for like certain roles like ebb and flow in terms of like how successful they are, and that can also vary like on level. Like I knew that mid this year was like pretty tough for teams, but last year it was like 80, especially for challengers last year. Like every GM I talked to was like 80 is really hard. Like I don't know how I'm gonna fill like this slot for 80. So I think that like that was one of the more interesting pieces too, like just the roles that people got hung up on this year.
Yeah, dude, I heard mid lane. Like, I mean, I think I talked about this
Yeah.
on an episode of Hotline League that, like, I talked to somebody on a team who's just like, all of us are trying to figure out what the fuck we're doing in the mid lane position, which I'm sure makes Croissant happy to have Palafox around. But I mean, what why do you think it was, Croissant, that so many teams struggled to find mid laners? Is it just it didn't feel like there's a lot of talent to go around, or what?
Um, well, I will say that I am. Uh, I think that evaluation of mid lane talent is like obviously we've had struggles with evaluating good or bad players for a long time in North America, but I think evaluating mid lane as a role is something that's just more complex and more difficult to consistently do than other roles. Um, uh, because, like people talk about how 80 carries get impacted by the supports or vice versa. But top lane is like an island, but mid lane gets is has to mid lane can have players that play through their top laners. They can have players that play like heavily for mid jungle skirmishing. They can have players that play heavily for syncing up with both your jungle and support. And if you have a support that doesn't have good synergy with your mid laner, or the mid laner doesn't work well with them, or their coaching staff doesn't place emphasis on that, it's like, there's a lot of things that make it hard to evaluate mid laners even when they've already played in the LCS. And then you go down a division and you look at NACL and you look at teams where coaching staffs are even less underdeveloped or less developed, and you will end up with a lot of people saying that there's not very good mid lane talent. But like I do think that Copy, for example, that a lot of the players get invested in, and but then either don't get the opportunity or like I think if Copy stayed on for like another split, which is something that like I know Mash and like many of the CLG coaches or energy coaches in the transition were like, hey, like DSG, there's an opportunity there. Like I think Young, could have been one of the mid laners for IMT or Dig, but I think these players would have gotten the shot, but or that Copy might have gotten a shot on one of these teams, but the timing didn't work out, and he wanted to step away. And in terms of like we had two mid lane is actually the role that changed the least, right? Out of in terms of new players coming into the league,
That's
it's
true. Yeah.
Yeah.
mid lane we had two players come in, and support we had two players come in. But for support we had Zazol, who's like returning but new, like at least from split to split. So we had Zazol, Ole, and Isles. Um, so but mid lane, our only new mids are Dove and Quid, or sorry, Dove and Mask. And I think there's also the sense that like to if you are going to import in a role and you want, then those mid lane will be the most important. So Mask and Dove. I think Dove is a very interesting player for sure, where
Yeah.
he could have a similar run as Gory, and I think I expect a similar amount of volatility. And then Mask, I think, is like closer to Quid, but could have. I'm more excited for Mask than Castle for sure, but um, yeah, I can't say why the mid lane like pool did jump around that way because I don't think anyone was fighting over those two players amongst the
Yeah.
other teams. It's
Yeah.
just those teams did their scouting and hopefully they did their due diligence and they were like, we want, uh, we think this makes sense. And I do think IMT, for example, like their roster, they might. I think a lot of the heavy lifting goes to a player again like Ole. It's on Ole to make sure that his Korean rookies are gelling well, working in the environment, and he's also, as far as I know, IMT doesn't have Korean speaking coaching staff. Um, Maybe they're putting effort into that. Maybe they're bringing somebody on, but like that's a thing where it's like Ole is going to be expected to do a lot of that, like, and that's something that probably Ole is like he's happy to do that, right? Or that's something that he wants to do, but will it work out as well as it did for Huhi and Gory and River with their coaching staff, like helping them out there? I just don't know. So it's curious.
So we are kind of getting ahead of ourselves and talking about some of the specific players, which is fine. But I do think one other trend I want to highlight was just how much we saw, even if they were players that were not. It's not like we saw a ton of players we'd never seen before coming to the LCS, but man, it is crazy how much teams just completely changed, even more so than previous. So like if I look at 100 Thieves, FlyQuest, Immortals, at least 4 players new on each of these teams, like complete roster rebuilds. And it's interesting because I think if you told somebody, like they just teleported to this point in time in the offseason, and you told them to like look at all these rosters, they'd be like, oh man, EG Golden Guardians leaving the league really shook everything up. And then you'd be like, well, no, actually, they were already gone, or we didn't find out they were leaving really, or it wasn't official until most of this movement had changed. And I guess you could say something like maybe Golden Guardians would have held on to River or whatever, so maybe there were some early signs or early effects of this stuff, but like it is dramatic how we saw. And by the way, when we only have 8 teams, it's almost half the league did basically complete rebuilds year over year. And so I won't spend too much time right now on my whole do our rosters change too often spiel that I always do, but I do think when we're talking about trends from in 2023 offseason, the fact that we had almost half the league do 4 out of 5 rebuilds was pretty fascinating. So, what? Oh, go ahead, Cubby.
Yeah, I actually like want to hit on that because if anything, like I think one of the things I really learned from COG Energy and like something that both Croissant and like ThinkCard have talked about is how the roster, like they never really overhauled the roster. They just added or changed pieces that they needed to like get it to work, right? Like, it was always kind of like swapping out a player or like something behind the scenes. I think it was Jonathan actually who was on a Hotline League who was talking about that with you, Travis. And I think like if anything, I mean that seems like a much smarter way to go about it, especially if you are a team that's competing. Like in basketball, it's very common where you're just going to switch out a couple role players and stars to like try and get the right mix so that you can make the push when you need to. And so I find it interesting that we do see so many rebuilds. Some of them involve players that like have played together before. Like I believe that Rich and Dove like have some history in their like back pocket. Or like I believe Impact and Umti, like the Umti's been playing forever, right? Or so like between them and Core, like there might be some prior relationship or like mutual respect, which often happens behind the scenes. But
That was pretty interesting because
yeah,
Spawn was talking about on TL announcement video that both Umti and Core had been coached by Edgar.
mhm,
Uh, Edgar on Bro for Umti, and then
mhm.
on Genji/Samsung for Core. And so how they like see the game in a similar way, it's obviously been like very removed, but that's cool to see. Yeah, as far as I know, Impact and Umti are not like bros,
Yeah.
unintended,
Yeah.
but it is I do think they respect what Umti has like achieved in LCK. So yeah, I think I want to talk about a bit about the rebuild stuff, but I
Yeah.
wanted to let you finish too. So
Yeah,
yeah.
I want your thoughts too, because like pretty much like where I'm getting is that if there's one takeaway I really had from like your guys' run in the last 2 years, it's that like making subtle changes instead of a complete overhaul. Where you're then again starting from scratch. I feel like is a better formula. And if anything, like NRG, a team that was doubted a lot and did eventually reach those heights over the 2 years. Looking back at what they did and even what they did this upcoming offseason, that's one takeaway or learning that like I'd actually really have at the forefront of my head. So
Mhm.
like I think that rebuilding should be a very big decision to make. And I was also surprised to see so many teams really have an overhaul.
So I would say, I don't want to get again too much into the rosters, but
Mhm.
like 100 Thieves, for example, like I think there's an argument to make that we're a data point in favor of like slight alterations over time, but there was still that rebuild time between 2021 and 2022, right? And so we could see 100 Thieves trying to be in that same phase, right? It's like rather than try to, let's say, they had Someday, Closer, Quid, Double F Busio.
Mhm.
Double F Busio maybe being like a pair that they couldn't retain, like Someday being someone that if they don't have that kind of bot lane that they just want, well, they already had Sniper in the pipeline, right?
Yeah.
I think in that sense, it's like, well, they always knew they were going to use Sniper Quid, and then now they're just like, okay, let's start off with those pieces like Meech, Ayla, and then we'll have River, who is just a valuable asset and can
Yeah.
help develop these other 4 players, and then from there, now we'll see. Okay, hopefully they give a full year to those 5 players, and then in between summer and spring of next year, maybe they make 1 to 3 changes. Like I think, like that is a valid like perspective on
Mhm.
uh, overhauls. And the only other team that did like a huge overhaul, I think, was FlyQuest. Like
Yeah.
everyone else has kept, I think, like at least what they thought was their core. Like for Shopify, it's like Boogie and Insanity. For Immortals, it's Tactical. Uh, and I mean, Solo and these other players weren't going to be a part of that core, so it was like keep Tactical, and Armeo has played with him, like etc. And then Dig had, you could go on and on. But I think 100 was like the big rebuild, and FlyQuest as well. Um, and there were like shifts, but like 15 out of 40 players of the league being like new, and with a lot of them being like returning from academy, or like Zazal who had played before. I don't know how that compares to previous off seasons, but it can feel like a lot because we only have 8 teams, right?
Mhm.
So we don't have as many top of the table teams that are like staying around to try to be contenders and only make 1 to 3 changes. Everyone from like let's say 4 to 8th is trying to do like more than 1 to 2 changes and make like 2 to 4 changes or something, right? So
Yeah. No, I think that's fair. And, the final thing I'll say on this before we get into the exact rosters and I have them ready to review on the rebuild stuff was that it was very fascinating for me in the looking at the Team Liquid threads and the Team Liquid subreddit because one, I encourage if anybody is like very fascinated about like you could almost do like a study on comparing roster thread rumors and reveals and all that stuff between the League of Legends subreddit and the team subreddits because there's so many times where like I think the League of Legends subreddit was like, oh, they're keeping APA and Jan, like this is great news. I'm so excited about this. Then you go to the Team Liquid subreddit, and the Team Liquid subreddit is like, oh no, this sucks. And it was funny because one of the top comments on one of these threads, I forget if I talked about this on the last Hotline League or not, but one of the top comments on one of these threads was like, oh, fans always say that they want us to keep NA talent, and then they do, and now everybody in this thread is mad. This was the Team Liquid subreddit. And a bunch of the replies in the Team Liquid subreddit were like, what? That's not why we're Team Liquid fans. We want to replace players until we win. Like, it's like, we want winning pros. Like, that's what we're here for. And it's fascinating to me that fan base, and it makes sense because they've kind of self-selected into Steve's philosophy, right? Like, if you disagree with the Team Liquid philosophy of, spin the roster wheel, the slot machine until you get 5 players that are going to win something, then you're just not a Team Liquid fan anymore. But it's fascinating to me that fan base seems to believe that like that's the only way you win. It's about getting big imports from other regions and replacing your weak spots every year and just trying to like assemble Exodia essentially, but not by slow iterations over time like NRG did. And like it's frustrating me because I'm looking at that thread and they're like, we're about winning. That's why we have to do this stuff. And it's crazy to me that in a year where NRG did these sort of iterative changes over time to get to a point until they were lifting a trophy and beating C9 that people I don't think ever thought was going to be able to happen with these two rosters, like that the Team Liquid fan base is still on that, like, no, fuck that. Let's go get, who's the number one Korean up and coming player in mid lane. Like, we got to get him over here. We got to get this APA guy out. Like, it's just fascinating. It's just very, very fascinating to me.
Yeah, I think it's I have noticed similar trends in just across the league. Because like the league subreddit is one thing, right? But then there's no subreddit. It's hard to have really active subreddits. That's not like a culture in a lot of different esports. It's like people talk about these fandoms in like Discord or on Twitter or on like these platforms, but like League subreddit has always been huge. And then like you select those funnels towards like TL, TSM, C9, CLG. Like these were the big subreddits. But Golden Guardians, EG, Energy, like none of those teams ever built out large subreddit. It's not active subreddits, even when the teams were doing well. And like 100 Thieves is like kind of in the middle there. But it's funny because C9, like Fudge is not the same as APA and Yon, but he has a similar kind of dichotomy of just like a lot of people really were like, you can look at the C9 offseason and be like really happy, but a lot of fans are just like, I can't believe we fucking have Fudge still. And
dude,
it's
yeah,
like,
the C9 subreddit just hating on him. Mark and I talked about this a couple of weeks ago. It's like wild to me because I'm like, how many teams would be so happy to have this player? How many GMs would be so happy to have this player? And the C9 fans are like, get him out of here.
Yeah, and I think it's fair that like, unlike there's not really a dichotomy there. Like people hate him on like the League subreddit as well. But I'd say it feels more in like if C9 has their roster posts, most of the discussion is like on JoJo and Vulcan returning, and just overall being like, yeah, we expect this roster to be first. And then in the C9 subreddit, it's kind of just like, if this squad doesn't get, to quarters or semis, it's a disappointment. They've already it's a foregone conclusion for them that they're going to win, but they're like, we're not going to do more than just win NALCS because we still have Fudge. And it's just like, really, you guys got to take things one step at a time. But that's what I like about NRG fans, because we keep them on their toes and they keep us, on our toes too, I guess. But we don't know what their expectations are or not. It's just, yeah.
Yeah.
That's really rough. I didn't see that sentiment on the C9 subreddit. Also, I think it's weird because like in a lot of other fandoms, you have comeback mechanics in traditional sports. Like I'm a Bears fan. I kind of like when we lose right now because I want draft picks. You can't really like root for that. So the only thing like you really have as a fan is to hope your team is cutthroat, which I don't love. And comeback mechanics are like the draft are fun. So.
Yeah. Well, okay, so before we get into teams, I do want to take a moment to shout out a bunch of people who have subbed on the stream. Zushi, 38 months, Avura for 50 months, 50. Thank you for your support. Penguin Buddy, Nickelodeon, Poggies Woggies, 7. Poggies Woggies 6 through 1 have not been. Dante Soar and Cubby, thank you, Cubby. Swede Be Good gifted a sub. Serenus, Waylon, Swede gifted a sub to Croissant. I'm sure he'll love that. And then Pentalite, thank you for the subs as well. So thank you to everybody who's been subbing. Esports winter is cold, and I can burn your subs to create just a little heat to keep myself alive. Anyway, let's get into the rosters. So I have a nice little layout here so we can go through people's different announcements. But we could start with 100 Thieves. We were talking earlier about how they've done basically a full rebuild around Quid, which is, I don't think, what people would have expected you to say about 100 Thieves if you were talking about them doing a full rebuild around a single player. No offense to Quid, but it is kind of funny that he survived the purge, so to speak. But their lineup is going to be the hotly anticipated General Sniper, River coming over from Golden Guardians, Quid, Meech coming up, and then Ayla switching over to 100T. So first off, Cubby, I just want to ask you, as the academy amateur, there's a million different words that they use now, challenger system guy, how is is Sniper going to meet all of the hype and drama and expectation that is on this guy? Because he's been like anticipated as a player blasting onto the scene for so many years. I think a lot of fans like myself who don't normally watch that stuff are just like, well, this guy's the next coming of God, according to everybody that's been saying stuff for the last couple of years.
I think the cool part about Sniper is that I think he's like the first generational talent that I've seen. Like we've had cousins and brothers competing in the LCS in the past, but given like where Viper went in the league and now that he's out and retired, and now this is like the first year that his younger brother is available, and then you throw on the fact that like he was challenger at what 12 or 13, and he was like this Riven player, and his older brother was actually a pretty good pro. Like, I think it's really crazy that like we actually have a player like this in the league, and I think it's really fun. I Sniper has a lot of good qualities for him. Like as a kid, he's very well spoken. He has an abundance of confidence. He is good at his champs. He'll play his champs and carries well. My concern with this team is that both Sniper and Meech, when I've seen them, they've been on teams where they do get resources. And so having one play without resources is going to have to be a learning curve. They have a great jungler and honestly mid to figure that out with. Like both River and Quid, I think, are good at enabling their lanes. But I'm curious, like as two rookies that usually get resources, how they can adapt. And Sniper, like as hyped as he was this past year in Challengers, there were other top laners that were better than him. Like Fake God and Surdy for me were the two top laners I was really excited to see play in LCS this year. And I'm really bummed that we won't see Surdy play in LCS. That guy is a very, very good laner, actually. So I like Sniper isn't as hyped given like his play, but I think that the pedigree, and if he's able to learn that fast and close the gap, like he's shown that he can do that in his like young career, and it's gonna be interesting to see if he can do that this time around.
So you're saying Sniper fell off? That's it sounds like you're saying.
Yeah, his solo Q stats are a little bit better than what I've seen in comp. We'll put it that way.
Okay.
All right, one question: which brothers have played in the LCS?
Sniper's
Maple
older brother
Street
is
and the odd one, going way back.
Who in the odd one?
Maple Street.
Maple Street.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I was like, were they cousins or brothers? And then
I'm pretty sure they're a pair of
Or
brothers.
High-
no?
or
no,
High
they were
involved.
yeah, they're brothers. They're brothers.
Or-
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah.
It's funny. Like our generation had Odd One and Maple Street, and
Yeah.
now the younger generation has Viper and Sniper.
Yep.
They did
And-
the name coordination much better.
Yeah.
Crimson's challenger too. His, Sniper's twin. I think it's always worth mentioning.
Yeah.
All right. What do you think of this lineup overall, Croissant?
Yeah, the top lane thing is interesting because I always enjoyed watching Sniper face off against like Jenkins, Surdy, and that quality of player. But at the same time, there's 4 new top lanes in the league. So how will Sniper, Castle, Fake God, and Bwipo? It's just like you have such a wide breadth of like top lane playstyles and talent that I think like there's an argument to be made that Sniper was for sure like for 100 Thieves it makes sense. Like I thought that they would try to pick up a coach like Soaz or someone to focus on development of Sniper, and in their staff they have Grayson and they have Spooks, and I think both have done a solid job of developing talent, and I'm excited to see how like Spooks continue on on GG on 100 and see how Grayson has done that development and before, but like I do have the same concerns as Cubby about the resource allocation. I do think that with Danny and Jojo, when you have really strong like players like Impact and Inspired and Vulcan to like they're the ones that funnel the resources into their rookie players, and it's just a question of like can Ayla and River create a system and play the map in a way that makes it so that these players are enabled, and Quid I think can still continue to grow. But yeah, it's like steel sharpens steel. Can Sniper learn really quickly? can he learn faster than his competition? Because if he can, then like I would not be like I would be somewhat surprised, but I don't expect Sniper to be the worst top laner in the league for like, more than like at most uh the first half of Spring Split. With good infrastructure, with good the opportunity to play, especially if we're like, we're an 8-team league and teams used to play like 28 games in a split, right? Like 4 round robins, like 4 times 7, and it's just like if you have that volume of games and if you have those stakes, and if Sniper is a player that thrives on stage, then you know I I could see him being anywhere from the sixth best top laner in the league to a top 3 top laner at the end of like a year of play, because maybe like you can make the argument that like what uh, Budge is trash. We already know that. And you have like our Impact and Bwipo, still young enough to hang with someone that's 10 years younger than him, in Sniper. So it's like with the right cards and with the right things, And did River enable Licorice a lot? Like, is that, these are all questions that I have on Sniper. But overall, I think I've seen a lot of people putting this team like decidedly last, and that's something that like I just have 100 Thieves in a range from third to like sixth place because I have a lot
Wow.
of respect for River, and River also coming over with Spooks. Like they have a lot of they have that continuity, right? And the most important thing to me is like that. I think River and Quid are just River's always really excelled when he's always wanted to play with players like Gory and Maple and Quid and players that he connects well with just in and out of the game. And if that's something that he can achieve with Quid, and Quid's like this him and River, I just imagine working well personality wise, but that's just speculation, right? But like I don't see, and I have a lot of high hopes for Meech as well, which is definitely a name that's not like if you followed NACL closely, he's a more exciting prospect or like a more consistent prospect than someone like Sniper, but less known amongst like fans in general, let's say.
Yep.
But I was pushing for Meech to be in our development pipeline since 2021. I am really excited. I thought he was LCS ready in 2023, but we obviously wanted to give like we wanted to see through things with Luger, and then by the time we were making that transition between spring and summer of this year, we knew that FBI would fit our needs for our core top side much better than like slotting in someone like Meech. And so I don't expect this team to place last. I really don't. I could see them placing last in like in spring maybe, but like and I guess maybe that's what people are doing most of their tier list. But I like to think year. I like to. It's more interesting to me to just see where people will be in summer than in spring. But yeah.
Yeah, I'm very aligned on Meech too, and it's cool hearing Croissant's perspective because he got to work in the same building with him. But both Meech and Masu, I actually have really really high expectations for. I think they're both very good,
Is
especially
it
Masu.
Meech or Mish?
Meech.
Meech.
Yeah.
That's what I thought.
TH. RCH, yeah.
Yes. Well, there's an extra E there. It's just there's some stuff that's happening. I don't know. No, I mean, for those. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I have to cut you off there. It's like if there was one fewer E's or one less, you would pronounce it Meech still. It would be like mech or.
I guess that's true. It would be mech. It would be mech. You could put an S in there, which would I guess make it mesh. But you could put the E afterwards. I don't know. Anyway.
Mensch.
So I do want to say that before the end of the year, I have asked Cubby to make a video on my YouTube channel that kind of overviews some of the rookie talent coming in. So with Mish, I'm sure he'll talk about them and Sniper as well. But Cubby, you've got a couple other people I'm sure that you'll talk about too. So as we review these rookies, if you're sitting there going like, wait, spend 10 minutes talking about each of these, we'll have a more in-depth and well-structured video hitting the channel before the end of the year talking about the rookies just to try to help build some hype for the next split. All right, let's move on to FlyQuest. Oh wait, one last thing I want to do. I do want to review the announcements that I have seen, at least from the Twitter side. I don't know if there are YouTube videos that I've missed, but like, I think 100 Thieves,
Rated.
I would give it a 7 out of 10 in terms of their announcement. At least in 2023, they did a whole video. I do think it's weird that like most of the video is about the old guard, and then it feels like they kind of rushed through the final 2 minutes with the new players. But overall, they actually did a video. They didn't, reveal with a JPEG, and hey, that's at least something. Okay, let's move on to FlyQuest. We are on to Whippo inspired Jensen, Masu, and Busio, with I guess their new slogan being hashtag time to fly. For those of you that don't know, Andrew Barton came over from EG, and I think that's part of the reason we're seeing, for instance, Inspired on this roster. But yeah,
That implies they'd have JoJo Travis.
what's that?
That implies they would have had JoJo Travis.
That's
As well.
true. That's true. I think that JoJo was somebody that they were gunning for, Cubby, if you had not heard the rumors.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Anyway, so I guess first off, we'll do our normal thing and go to Cubby and be like, "Yo, what do you want to talk about with Masu?"
This guy was our most valuable prospect from summer. So that award for us, it's pretty much like the idea / essence of the award is we give it to a player that hasn't competed in a major region like in the past year, and then it's pretty much like projecting how many wins like this player will be worth in the 2 years that he goes pro, with more emphasis on the second year, like how we think he's going to develop. Part of the reason that Masu was ranked so highly by us as a broadcast, like this is the first time that like we ever gave the award out, it was pretty much unanimous. It was only his third split playing competitively, which I find crazy. Like he'll be going in, he hasn't even played competitive for 2 years. And he was, I believe, our best marksman that we had this past split. Props to Meech as well. Meech was one of the marksmen that was able to compete really well with Masu, but Masu he was so good on so many different champs. Like I was watching this guy play AP Kog'Maw and like snipe like players out from nowhere, and then like the next game he'll play Zaya and just find this like ridiculous team fighter rip where is really good spacing, which both him and Meech do, which I think a lot of our marksman prospects have actually kind of struggled with. Whereas like these two, I actually rate them really highly in those categories, which hasn't been the case in the past. But he's really exciting. Like this guy actually team fights like out of his mind, and I know that the level of play will be higher as he jumps up, but I actually have a lot of faith in Masu and Meech. They're both going to be okay, and especially Masu, given that I think the team, the way the FlyQuest is built, is like Blippo Jensen. They've been at their best in their career when they have been able to play for and enable bot sides. So this team really is set up to, I think, bolster Masu and Busio and try and get them to step up.
Croissant, what's your verdict on all 5 of these guys in this lineup?
I definitely agree with Cubby's outlook on Masu, and I think that it was always interesting for me to watch like Meech's team fighting versus Masu, and then Masu's greater depth in his pool. Um, but Meech getting the better of him in like certain you know certain lane phases or certain team fights, and it's like it felt very neck and neck, and that's something that will translate well to LCS, and that Meech, even though I think that Meech hadn't, he had been playing in tier 3 for quite a while, but he had been playing for longer than Masu.
Yeah.
And Masu is, they're both very, very quiet, very interesting players for sure. And yeah, like, which one will claim the title of the next Danny, right? But the difference that, with FlyQuest, people will make comparisons about this roster to EG of 2021, but the of 2022, but the main difference being that Busio had a full year to develop with Double Lift, and I think that that can't be understated. Is like I can't imagine a better like pairing for Busio in that first year. And so yeah, for me it's like, you know, it's a single rookie roster. It's a roster with extremely uh, strong personalities, but maybe different ways of, you know, views on how to play the game. Like Busio, um, people might think that he's like um, he's been vocal about, you know, how he likes to play the game and how like how he likes to be creative and how he wants to approach um, just things in a unique way, and that's something that like he's not going to like, is he going to fully be utilized by Inspired or vice versa, right? Or is there going to be like uh yeah, so the I was wondering who they were going to get for a coaching staff because I'd heard a bunch of different names being floated, but Nuke Duck, I think uh I for some reason I hadn't been thinking about him in that position, but I'm really excited to see how he like enables that team because he, you know, he worked with Alan for he worked with Busio, and I do expect him to do like one of the better jobs of like any if you put any of the coaching staffs and you put them on FlyQuest's team and navigating like how are we going to have Inspired and Whippo like and Jensen enable bot side, that that is a those are hard questions to answer, but if things go well, then it's like, yeah, this team has, um, to me, they have a more uh, cohesive plan of actually how to win the game than Cloud9 does uh, from start to finish. Um, because as we were talking about, Cubby, for you earlier, you were talking about like uh, high resource top laner, resource AD carry on 100 Thieves.
Hmm.
Like Cloud9 might have the same issues with, you know, JoJo and Berserker, and we've seen JoJo. Uh, it's not like they played for Danny in a lot of those, you know, game states. So they still played mainly through mid jungle, and Danny was a insurance for later. But if
Hmm.
Maso and Busio want to play like Kate Lux and hump the enemy bot lane under tower, that's something that can see Jensen Inspired and Whippo playing well around. And so yeah, it's really exciting because I feel like they will have the most diverse playstyles with Whippo as well. So they're a team that I'm just excited to see for draft, for development of Masu and continued growth on Busio, and just see Jensen return to form. And you know, he only missed Worlds this past year, so expectation is like it's going to be his ninth in 2024.
Yeah,
So
Yeah.
and I mean he was on Dig, so it's hard to even count that as
yeah, and
missing worlds.
they were even really close.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like if we saw just how much weight it takes for him to not be able to make it. I think, by the way, folks, that if you've not seen already my interview with Busio, I did one with him literally on at World Finals, and then we had an embargoed until we were able to put that out once he got announced, and so that came out. But he does talk a little bit about switching over from sort of being the rookie for Doublelift to now having his own rookie. And I think it echoes a lot of what Croissant was saying, where like he does have his own opinions, and I think is excited to sort of establish that. I do wonder, I think I saw in Twitch chat, where was it? J-Lo says, Whippo inspired a Duke Duck in a room together. And I do kind of wonder how opinionated this team is going to be. I hadn't really thought about it until this moment, but there are a lot of really big personalities, and I think that and by the way, Jensen, I think too is not. I'm not saying he's toxic by any means, but I do think he probably has his own ideas of the way that he wants to play the game, and so I do think looking at this roster, it feels a little boom or bust to me in terms of will these folks get along together? Will they mesh well together? How are the personalities going to flow out? And especially if the season starts off rocky, how quickly are things going to devolve? And we haven't seen Whippo. I'm not saying he's going to be bad by any means. It seems like he really loves League and stuck around, but like we haven't seen him for a bit too. So I think that's a really big question mark for us going into this year.
the last thing I wanted to say on that was just having worked with Jensen, I think that he is, yeah, he has a clear idea on how he wants to play the game, but I found him one of the easier work players to work with for sure, just in terms of like you know what you're dealing with, you know where his perception on the game doesn't fluctuate based off of like emotional factors, right? And that can happen to rookies, that can happen to vets. But his strength has always been like, for me, year over year, finding ways to slightly iterate his champion pool, slightly iterate his play style, the way that like we did for our overall like coaching staff for our team, and like our overall team's vision. But he does that for himself, and he does that, uh, and he doesn't do it for the people around him, but the people around him just have an easy like point of reference for like, okay, like, I want to play this way. And uh Jensen was never like, he's played the enabling styles like Zillion plus Kindred, right? He's played the uh uh styles where he has to be the carry. He's the Azir, he's the Syndra, Orianna, etc. And he also has played the assassins. And so I think I'm excited to see, like, again, FlyQuest, because they have those dynamic playstyles and unique champion pools on top and bot, but then they have Jensen holding it down and being really consistent. And if him and Inspired can work together, which I think that they should be able to, because Jensen has worked really well with junglers that have strong views on how to play the game. And he lets them know, like, this is what I can do within, like, this is what I can do and this is what I can't, then uh, yeah, they just have a strong point of control, and I think it's cool.
It's
I
crazy
think
to hear how different he is versus previous incarnation.
yeah, no, I think he definitely mellowed out by the time I'd worked with him, and he's even had more years, and he had the dig year, which will change a person. So I expect him to be like,
Yeah. Okay. So I'm trying to like, Cubby, anything you want to follow up on Croissant before I give FlyQuest my rating?
No, it's been interesting. I agree with the strong personalities, but like a lot of people are saying, like, how do you coach that? I mean, I think a good coach like can enable and work with that. Like that. It's something where like when you're gonna play with people like Blippo and Inspired, right? Like they've achieved a lot and they've worked really hard in this game. It's kind of hard to like you're not gonna come in as a coach and like want to like stop or curb that. I think it's very doable if you find the right person to kind of like nurture that. And I think that if Nukeduck has a relationship with a lot of these players, which I suspect he might, given like where he's worked and just being from Europe, like a big chunk of this team, he actually could be a decent candidate for that. So I have a similar diagnostic to Croissant. I think they have a clear way they can play the game, but I'm curious to see like how that changes or they iterate on it. And also it's just worth saying that Inspired won MVP when he played here, and he's really good.
Yeah.
So it's fun having him back in the league.
All right. My rating for this FlyQuest announcement, I don't know if we're doing audio, but if so, I will just tell you that it's a bunch of flashes of the players in their previous jerseys with a bunch of dramatic. I don't know what the style is. I know it's calling back to like a specific style of video or film or whatever, but I'd give it a 6 because there's this like. You could have done more with the sort of players a little bit. I don't know. It's kind of quick flashes. I mean, it's way better than a JPEG. I'll give them a huge credit, but
it definitely
I do.
tickles my brain.
Yeah. Yes. It's visually flashy. Maybe that's what it is. They're like, we got to get the zoomers in, and so we're just going to do rapid face stuff. So
The only thing I don't like is that last like liquid metallic logo. I'm like, I can barely read it, but
the
like,
FlyQuest that looks
yeah,
like this looks like the this brings me back to the 90s. It's like Jinkos or whatever. The Jinkos logo for those jeans are kind of like that, right?
I feel like I'm supposed to see Bill Nye the Science Guy in the next frame.
I would give it a 7 out of 10, but 6 out of 10 is fair.
Okay. All right. Anyway, well, actually, wait. I'm kind of curious, Croissant, because unfortunately you walked into this because you gave the last team a range. What is your range for this team? Because you said
1 to 4.
1 through 4.
If they,
Okay.
yeah, I don't see them playing. Like, even if they boom, like, they have the baseline skill to just never end below top 4.
Yeah. You're moving away from your microphone, so you're fading
Oh,
away.
sorry.
You could bring the microphone with you when you go back. You just have to make sure it's always in close
This
proximity.
isn't like a stand on stage. It's like it's a
Yeah,
little more.
it rotates. Mine does the same thing. You could move forward or back with it. Yeah. Anyway, so let's move on to my favorite League of Legends esports team, which is Immortals. So they've announced their lineup of Castle, Armeo, Mask, Tactical, Ole. They did. I will give them a great credit for their tactical announcement, which was involving Hotline League. Anybody that shouts out Hotline League in their announcement is fantastic. But this is their full lineup, building quote unquote building around tactical, bringing back Ole, and yeah, I was really surprised to see the fan sentiment to Ole. Like whenever he got reported that he was coming to this team, the League of Legends subreddit was like, "Yo, Ole's back, hooray!" Which I feel like is, and I don't know why that is, because I feel like a player who had a similar situation to Ole, where he's been on a bunch of different teams to varying levels of success, quite literally varying. A lot of them are good, not so much. They'd be like, "Oh, it's Ole," but like I actually saw the sentiment was pretty good. So I don't know. What do you want to tell us about Mask, Cubby?
Oh boy, that's a tough time to get asked because of we got Croissant leaving. I honestly haven't seen the tape yet on Mask. I've yet to go through his tape, so I'm not sure.
We'll wait till Croissant comes back.
Yeah.
In fact, here we'll. Oh no, he is back. Okay.
I am more familiar with Castle though, because I do watch some LCK.
Okay.
It's
Well,
a great league.
let's start us off with Castle. What do you think of Castle?
Castle, I was a bit surprised to see coming over as a top laner. I know that like when the league went from 10 to 8, like Surdy had a job lined up with EG. It was reported on, and it was likely that Licorice is going to be back on Golden Guardians as well. I would have liked to see either of those players like get a chance to be an LCS. Licorice was a great top laner last split. Surdy for me was someone I was really excited to have like get a chance, because I thought that he was him and Fake God were clear cut the best top laners that we had in Challengers last year or in summer. So I was a bit surprised to see Castle, and Castle wasn't close to being the best top laner in LCK Challengers. So I like of all the names like bring over, I was surprised it ended up being Castle.
I'm surprised you're surprised.
Well,
not because I disagree probably with your sentiment, though obviously I'm not an expert on it, but this feels like a very LCS and a very Immortals move. I don't know, Croissant, what's your take on Mask and or Castle?
I would have expected something like this with a different coaching staff, but I was surprised that it happened with Sharks, because prior to FlyQuest, I don't think Sharks had worked with like that many Korean players, having worked in ERLs and having worked in LCS. So the thing that I hope is that, and I don't think is that unlikely, is just this is something that, Fnatic did with Noah and now Jun for their new support over Trimby and funnily enough, their coach at Fnatic is Nightshare, who was at Immortals, is like, there is a strong argument to make that, like, if you look at the economics of it, and you look at, like, if you're a North American player like Spica, not saying that Spica or Licorice or these players opted not to play on a team like IMT, but if you play at a team on IMT for minimum, or let's say like up to 50% above minimum, you can do that, but you have like if you stream and then you join a team later like Whippo or someone, and you can join like a FlyQuest, or you can join a top table team, then that is, I'm not saying that's like what I would suggest people do, right? There's obviously like, if you grind it out and you achieve great things in Immortals or a team like NRG or CLG, then you will get interest from teams like FlyQuest, but those teams will often like, they'll value a player like Jensen or et cetera, like by the sheer fact that they haven't answered that question of, are they still good, right? And so if you have those players shifting out or being more expensive, and you have Korean rookies that could be the next Berserker, could be the next, etc. And I had, heard that LS had, wanted to work with Mask, or players like Mask in the past, then it could be them having reached the same conclusion. It could be them being like, oh, well, LS wanted to work with this guy and he wanted to work with Berserker. So, like, I don't know what it is, right? But, and as for Castle, I definitely, of the footage that I watched of both players, I was not as impressed with him. But he and Mask had played together before. And so if their logic is like, Mask wants to play with not just Ole, but he wants to play with another person that can make him feel comfortable, then you're bringing two rookies over together in the same. They're going to be experiencing the environment and the shift at the same time, right? So that's a lot better to me than actually like Quid being thrown into like, he had Kane, but him and Someday are gonna have like a generational gap, or him and Closer, who he plays most close. So I understand the logic. The still biggest like thing that I have a critique for is just where is the staff support and infrastructure for it. But if Ole can get them over that hump, then yeah. And Tactical speaks some Korean too, so I think that they could. I'm. I think I haven't seen like a lot of commentary on like this upcoming split, but I do. I thought a lot of people would be like IMT is going to be 8th again, but I saw a lot of people rating them like pretty highly, and I don't know why that is, but I have them with like a bigger chance of ending up on the lower range than 100 Thieves, but I have them at a similar like peak if things go well. So
like, you think Immortals could be 3rd best in the league?
I think that they could. It really depends on the big question mark for me is like Armeo and Ole. Like their playstyle as like a jungle support would be very different from like a Blabber Vulcan or an XU Isles. So Ole's playstyle has fluctuated a lot across the years of like on the TL style playing for double lift, and then he's also tried to play like hyper aggressively on like Bard, Thresh, like these types of champions and impacting the map. So and he's consistently like I think for Ole there was always like a how happy is he on a team, how well does he mesh personality wise, and like there were big stressors for him at different parts of his life, but I think if he comes in, like he's always maintained a really high ranking in solo queue. He's always been a really big grinder, and so he can. I don't count any of the teams out. I think that the team that I'm probably lowest on overall is Dig, but I do think that if everything goes well for IMT, that Tactical and Mask can be tier like carries that are good enough to bring a team into a top 3. Yeah.
I mean, I think that's a very big if. Because for me, I feel like Immortals has never been able, what the meme used to be like talent suppression machine or whatever, but I feel like generally speaking, a player goes to Immortals, they play worse than they did previously. And I think Tactical with Treats last year sort of ran against that, but then you saw that Revenge looked a lot better whenever he switched into EG than he had when he was on IMT. And so I feel like this is one of the more complicated iterations of the Immortals system and roster to date. And so like that does not give me more confidence in the capabilities of this organization to bring a successful roster together. And I think a lot of it does come down to what is likely a lack of support and on the infrastructure side in terms of building this stuff. And like, to your point, having a roster like this, you tend to need a little bit more support on something like that. So
yeah, I will say that like with Armeo, like for me, a lot of hope of this roster working is actually going to be Armeo because of just the new top side. I also don't think that highly of Castle. I do think really highly of Armeo. He does have coaching experience with C9. This guy's a hard worker. I know from talking with EG last split that the staff actually really liked working with Armeo because it was accommodative, like of the 6-man situation. He really helped Shaden, and also he gave a lot of feedback to the coaching staff to like help them improve too. And so again, like resources and closing the gap. If Armeo can, like, he is someone that I believe like can bridge that, and this guy does work hard and also has pretty consistently good solo queue accounts. So I think that like I like to kind of throw Armeo in the boat of what Croissant was saying with like OA making things work. I think he can also try and make things work. And who knows? Armeo's won in challengers, so we'll see if he can win if he gets like a steadier roster, which he's really never had. So yeah.
Yeah, I will say they will do better this year than they usually do
I hope so.
because there's 2 less teams. So
Yeah. I think most people still have them bot 3, but we'll see.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, let's take a quick break. I'm gonna go grab some water and use the restroom, and you folks can definitely do the same thing. I will just play some music on screen while we take a quick stream break, but we'll be back. All right, we are back from the break. Some shout outs to Omega Diamond
Savs.
Zinc and Little Indian Man, Bigger Frog, 23 Chicken Wings, Dragon Seven Head, Hint of Line, George Zulu, The Noblet, and Frost Queen Ash. Thank you everybody for your subs. Let's see, where are we? Everybody, we're good on audio, right? Everybody can hear me? Okay. I realized before I left I should have given my final review of the Immortals announcement. I'm torn because I think this post is pretty. I would give this a 5, but they did do the clever thing with the tactical announcement, so I'm gonna put them back at 6 because I'm gonna count that as like a plus point. So, but yeah, we've now hit the JPEGs of the roster announcements, but this one at least is like custom art for the JPEG. So
Yeah, and they credited the artist, and it was cool. So
yeah, that is cool.
I would like to get.
Oh,
I would like
Twitter
to get
does
the
not
drawing.
want to credit the artist.
I think they might have replied to it down there, but
Yeah, this doesn't load for me whenever I'm not logged in on this browser. So
The,
shout out the artist.
I like the art. The art was cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. They had all the
Okay,
individuals too. That was nice.
let's move on. So Cloud9, I don't have like a single visual for them, unfortunately, because they did like multiple announcement videos. But their full lineup this coming split is going to be, as I pull up my notes here, Fudge, Blabber, JoJo, Berserker, Vulcan. Is this just everyone's automatic number one for next year? I guess Croissant, you might have something to say about it, but
Yeah, I was gonna ask him how he feels about winning and then
given your
moving on second.
position, but
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, Cubby, where do you think this team's power level is?
I mean, I'm same with FlyQuest. The worst they do is top four. Like it's 1 through 4, and I think that putting JoJo on this team is very exciting. Along of course with Vulcan, but Berserker and JoJo felt like last split probably the two strongest individuals in LCS. So now having them on the same team with a good supporting cast, like Blabber was also MVP last year or like this past split. Um, like Blabber has always been very strong. I will say that Croissant teased this earlier.
Okay, so I was thinking that
with the resource distribution between JoJo and Berserker. But I would throw Blabber in the mix there and say that this might be the first time where like Blabber won't be dictating his own resources on the map. A lot of C9 map setups, like how I've seen C9 play in the past with Blabber, is that he runs the show and he is a very efficient jungler. That even when he ganks, there's smart stops, right? And he's able to consistently, like he's done really well in NA playing this way. He's one of the best players we've ever seen in the league. But I'm curious to see if he can adopt with having a little bit less resources. I think that Blabber has actually grown a lot in terms of different styles he can play compared to like him as a rookie. But I think that this will be the most that he's challenged in that department this year.
All right, Croissant, how much of a challenge are these guys going to be for NRG? Are they going to be your biggest rival, you think?
So I've never rated my own team on these tier lists or whatever. I will say that C9 is the team I'm looking forward to playing against the most. I had Fly from 1 to 4. I had 100 from 3 to 6. I had IMT from 3 to 8. I have C9 from 1 to 2. And I do like the chat being like, they're top 2 and it ain't 2. But the things I'm keeping an eye out for are, people were very happy to see Eminus leave, and I don't necessarily agree that he was the source of all of C9's issues. But,
well, he wasn't the only one that left. He wasn't the only one that left either.
Yeah, and I think that JoJo. It was cool seeing JoJo play both with Impact and also with Revenge, and the different, like him enabling Revenge in a lot of their games and roaming up and diving, or the different roles that they had. And how is Fudge's playstyle going to change with JoJo on his team? Like, there's no more some people will say no more excuses. Some people will say like now this is like a solid opportunity for Fudge to maybe shine more, and not have to be like the stable piece of the team or whatever. And at the same time, I think that Sven did so much for Berserker and was so important for his like growth and development. And even if Sven, was not fully towards the end of his role, he'd already known that maybe he wanted to go back to AD carry, etc. Really interesting to see how Vulcan is going to slot in there, and then also if Vulcan what do you take away from a split like summer 2023 FlyQuest, right? If C9 does have dips in their performance, even with things that are supposed to be clear upgrades, it can be similar to how FlyQuest was supposed to go from third to top 2 from spring to summer, and they didn't. But I find it. I had issues with FlyQuest rosters in both spring and summer of last year, and I said as much. And but I have a lot fewer issues with this team, which is why I just have them from 1 to 2. It's like uh, I think I'm not as worried about the resource distribution thing because I do think that Blabber has shown that he can, like, he's no longer the player that only plays like Olaf and full clears and like shows up and kills everybody, but uh, I think he improved a lot of his tank play, but he still needs to, yeah, they just need to figure out their drafting style and how, like, what's too much experimentation and what's not enough, something like that. So excited to see them play.
What do you think? I mean, what do you think, Croissant, about how they were able to build this roster? Because it feels to me like it almost feels
The
like
rumor is that
they
they took cuts.
What'd
Yeah.
you say?
The rumor is that players took cuts to play with JoJo.
Yeah, I mean that sounds about
And
right. Because
there's also the news that, or like the rumor that, um, like they had landed on a number for JoJo, and then there were some shenanigans, and then they ended up having to go higher, uh, after like already verbaling or something. But I hope that didn't have an outsized impact on like their ability to like keep Mythty on board or expand coaching staff. So I am curious to see what they do there because it is important to like, you know, FlyQuest, if we're talking about them as having big personalities or whatever, um, like I've never worked with anyone on C9, but I, you know, it it could be either roster could be easier or harder to work with, right? And it's just about what what is C9 doing from they have, I think they've proven they've had consistent like they've gotten a lot of their teams to the same place, but they're still they've still had growing pains and they've still had issues. So what are they doing to improve on the issues that they identified from their international performances in 2023 and their like prep going into finals of like LCS, even not even looking like at Worlds? Yeah, those are my big questions. But that's like how their roster came together. You know, Berserker. I heard that Berserker was like the last piece to actually return and re-sign at C9. So he's someone that wants to play with JoJo and potentially Vulcan as well, right?
yeah,
So yeah,
yeah, I just think it's fascinating because yes, obviously they were contested on JoJo and we heard that stuff, but like I'm kind of surprised that they were. I feel like it's a sign of the times that it feels like in some ways they were fairly uncontested on building like the super team this year.
I
Obviously,
think part of that though
yeah,
is like everyone wanted to play with JoJo Blabber.
yeah,
Like, once JoJo fell, like everyone else fell pretty much. And I think that would have been the case almost no matter where JoJo went. I think like Blabber would have obviously had a lot of pull still,
yeah.
but yeah.
yeah,
I think it is. It kind of reminds me of the old TSM days, because back in the old days, players took pay cuts to play on TSM, and this was kind of before you got to the point where like Team Liquid had all this cash that they could throw around, and everybody started throwing around a bunch of cash and making all these big deals and bringing over players from other places, and it became like everybody just wants to play with Bjerg, and so TSM had this sort of inherent roster building advantage because they had Bjerg, and if you have Bjerg, everybody else will take less money because they get to play with them, and then you continue to maintain this kind of dominance over the league, which allows you to continue to perpetuate it. Like signing JoJo feels like such a big win for C9 because they will sort of lock in this advantage. It's you were talking about, Cubby, these like catch-up mechanics when it comes to traditional sports where there's like the draft stuff. This is almost like the opposite, right? Where having JoJo on your team is sort of entrenches you. It's almost like a snowball effect, I feel like, if the roster can look good and people continue to want to play here. Like you will just have an advantage when it comes to the off season because people will want to play on your team. So I don't know. It's a little surprising to me that it just feels so different than a couple of years ago where like you had Team Liquid slinging around whatever money and everybody was like bidding each other up and doing all this stuff to build, all these different super teams. It's just so different, for obvious reasons, but yeah. So we think that this team will be top 2. I assume that's kind of where you said top. You said 4 is the bottom, right, Cubby?
Yeah, I would expect top 2 or 3, and I would power rank them at 1. I think that like they have the three strongest individuals from last year, like in Berserker, JoJo, and Blabber. I thought.
Yeah.
I think it's pretty crazy.
Papa Smithy in the chat asking how many entire LCS lineups will cost less than JoJo's individual salary, which is a great question.
Potentially 5 or 6.
Yeah.
I don't know.
There hasn't been. Has there been any reporting around the exact number yet? I don't know if I missed it in, like,
I have a rough number.
How does it compare to previous?
All right, give it to us, Cubby.
Yeah.
I heard it was like 900K before the sandbox thing went down.
Really?
As the buyout or the salary?
The salary. That was the rumor. I don't know.
I mean, I had heard somewhere in like the 500 range. So I heard that
it could have been
on.
totaled. It could have been totaled with the buyout because I don't know what the buyout was. But yeah.
Yeah. Because it was my expectation that I'm getting a little bit of echo back from somebody. I'm not sure. But it was my expectation that it was more in the like $500,000 range. So maybe it is 900 for the whole thing. And by the way, we should just say Cubby's not officially reporting this. All right, this is like one rumor he'd heard. Yes.
Yeah.
I'm officially asking JoJo to buy me dinner.
Yeah.
I mean, it's crazy that like. Because a while back, I think 2 years ago, people would be like, yeah, that sounds about right for like this mega star for the league. But nowadays, it's like, it's crazy.
Yeah.
All right. And if that's the case, then yeah, half the league probably is going to be under entire LCS lineups will be below that number. So, but it is a good question of whether or not that included buyout or not. So.
I am not 100% sure. That was just a number I heard being thrown around.
All right. The last thing I do want to talk about with the Cloud9 stuff is Fudge, the Fudge stuff, because we did kind of gloss over it at the beginning in terms of people being skeptical. But Cubby, were you surprised that they kept Fudge? Because so many people seem to be not thrilled about that.
No. Like, I don't think Fudge had his best split last year. But for me, like in the history of LCS, it's always felt like, at some point, if you want to win, you have to get through Impact and Someday. And for a lot of splits, it felt like those two players had a leg up on everyone else. Like, I think Impact's like an all-time great top laner who will never get the credit he deserves because he played in NA. And people just don't think as highly of the region. And Someday, too. Like, these guys are both outstanding players. Fudge, for me, was like one of the top laners that could actually compete with them. Like that was the value for me of Licorice, like from this split and like splits past. That's something that I think Dokla, he hasn't been quite as dominant, but that's also not the role that he has in his team. And I think that Dokla has been a top laner that has proven that he can compete with those guys. And that makes Dokla for me like really valuable because like how I view the league is at some point you're gonna have to beat Impact, and Impact's really damn good. So like based on that logic, no. Especially like if Wonder fell through, as I saw that he was considered. But no, I mean Fudge is a fun player. I think really highly of Fudge. Like he did not have his best split. When Fudge has his best split, he has shown that he can be the best top laner in this league. So yeah, I really hope that we see that. Fudge to me is a solid player who also has improved. So I'm not surprised at all.
Any surprise from you, Croissant?
No surprise. I have a lot of respect for Fudge. I've always thought he was very good. He was spotlighted by LS before playing in the LCS, and I think he's always looked for like edges in his gameplay, and I think there's been issues with motivation, but I think that I want to preface this with also like. I know it can seem like I think C9 fans have good reason to like desire for more and aspire for more, and I do like admire a fan base that like believes in like that pushes their organization to like further heights. And I don't get anything out of defending. Like, if anything, like I'm my main goal is like, having people understand the context of why energy, like why we do certain things, what players go through on our team, and how there's always more context than like this player underperformed this week or blah blah blah. And if C9 takes heat for having Fudge and underperforming at some part of the split or some part of the year, that's like good for energy, right? But when I think about the league as a whole, and when I think about players like Fudge and the kind of respect that should be given to players like Fudge, it is harder to stay on the top than to be at any other part of the league, right? And if you think about it, Dokla just finished his sixth split in the LCS. And I still don't think, is at his peak. He still has room to continue growing. Fudge is exactly the same situation, except his six splits were not broken up into 3-3. They were just six consecutive splits where he was often on the strongest team. And when you're on the strongest team, it's like in some ways it's easier to shine and be a certain type of player on a lower tier team. And in other ways, it's like you're not going to be the focus if your team has decided to play around Berserker, right? And so I think Fudge is capable of more growth, and I just hope to see that from him. So.
Yeah. I think that's super good. I also lied when I said that was going to be the last thing we talk about, because I think there's a lot of conversation around the coaching staff, and a lot of the same fans that are calling for Fudge's head are now calling for Mythi's that I've seen. And I heard you say something earlier in this conversation, Croissant, that made it sound as though you were hoping that Mythy was still there, or so that this would not impact Mythy's ability to be there. So, without talking about who is there on the coaching side, because I don't know if they've done the official announcement yet, what is your take on Mythy as a coach, and would it surprise you if he's still there?
So I think for a lot of people, it's easy to say like, I haven't worked with this person, so I have no idea what they're capable of or not. Any success that this team has cannot be attributed to them, or any failures they have cannot be attributed to them. I use a lot of context clues. I use a lot of like, what I've heard from players working with staff or vice versa. I think that Mythy has very clearly defined strengths, and I think that like the goal on any coaching staff is like, just as with players, you need to find ways to supplement those strengths or weaknesses. And I think that's why I just hope that Mythy has people working alongside him, because I think that he's aware of like what his strengths and weaknesses are, and I think that it's just about. I think it's important that he gets a. I don't see a better. They're already doing two shakeups here, right? And bringing in a new mid support. And I think if Blabber and Fudge working with Mythy, that's all that matters, right? And so there's no point in like shaking it up. And we saw what happened when we brought in a world champion coach, and we brought him into a team here, and he did pretty well the first split, and then the second split things didn't. So I want continuity, and I want I want players to be able to. I don't want too much to be shaken up, so I am just happy that like we get to see C9 with slight adjustments and on paper upgrades, and we get to see how Mythy can help these players continue to evolve, and his vision for the game. So I respect how I respect how C9 plays overall and their map movements, and it's not just all blabber, and it's not like their failures and successes are linked, right? As a coaching staff and as a set of 5 players. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
All right, I will give C9 a 9. No pun intended, but I think that their whole like multi-post thing, the couple different videos, they did all this stuff. Like I think they were skits, and I think skits might be a little overdone, but they went through and shot the stuff really well. I think they did a good job. That's how I feel about their announcement. Good job, C9, on your announcement. Mm-hmm. All right, Dignitas. I would give them a 0 because they haven't even fully announced their team officially, from what I can tell.
They did. Isles came out today.
Okay, so the Isles
Yeah.
thing is it? Did they do an announcement post? Because I saw some
Yes.
people saying it was just in their like their title or something or their
No,
header.
Isles tweeted.
Isles tweeted.
Uh,
Okay,
yeah. No, it's on Dig too.
okay.
Uh, that's that account's ancient.
Wait. So this is a tweet from December 1st, 2023. But then when I click on Dignitas LOL,
What the hell?
the most recent video or the most recent post is from October 2019.
You want to maybe try hard refresh? Because I'm on the same exact page. You're getting something different. Oh, you're not logged in. That's why.
Yeah, I'm not logged in, but
All five are up for Dig.
is there a reason why if I'm not logged in I would get served stuff from pre-pandemic times on this Twitter timeline?
I guess they just give the highest engagement post. That's crazy.
Dude, Twitter is
That's so dumb.
They're going through it right now.
yeah. Yeah. I miss the old days. Okay, hang on. I think I've got this Isles tweet. Let me see if I can put it in. Okay, yeah, here we go. So they did post today. They did post today at 5. Okay, cool. Okay, so they've done their full post. I guess I'll save my ranking till now, but they did one I think for each individual player. So we know the full lineup now. It's Rich, XU, Dove, Tomo, and Isles. So this is a lineup that saw again considerable changes to their system. Man, I think I said 3 out of the 8 teams, but really half the league changed out almost all their roster, 4 or 5 players. So kind of bonkers. Cubby, we'll start with you. What do you think of the Dignitas lineup for 2024?
This is probably the roster I have in eighth. Yeah. I actually think that I'm kind of excited to see what Isles can bring, as Isles hasn't been competing in the last couple of splits. But he's had really, really high solo queue rankings very consistently. But I think that like Dove for me, I was curious to hear Croissant like rank Dove so highly. For me, Dove was always a kind of a limited player. Um,
I don't think I ranked him highly. I just
said like he could be gory like 3.
Oh,
You had a comparison to gory with him. I want
he
to yeah.
could be the same. He could fill the same type of
Yeah.
role and have the same like dynamic play style, but just a worse version for sure. I agree.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't rank Dove too highly. I think Rich is good and like was good last split and he's exciting. And XU for me, I think the strengths that XU has are that he'll make like he can play carry junglers and he can play early aggressive junglers and he will be aggressive and make plays in the map. I think he does a decent job of setting up map for his team. When he played with Insanity on the Challengers roster, they were really strong that split. In spring or in summer of last year and then spring of this year he wasn't. It was a slightly different scenario, but I think XU like does a good job of prep and planning. I don't think XU is going to be the strongest jungler, and he wasn't the strongest jungler from the pool that we had in Challengers League. Like I think that there were other jungle's a really deep role in NA. It's very talented, and for me, I think XU is going to be okay because it's a deep role. But like I had other junglers over him. But yeah, I probably have this team in eighth.
Croissant, ignore that Toby's in the chat right now from Dignitas and just act like he's not here.
I do think that again, I still I have a lot of respect for Rich. I think it is interesting that Dove, like the last time I watched a lot of him was when he placed top 3 with Sandbox in as a top laner. So you know, I think I would if someone told me at the end of the split that Dig placed top 4, like that's an overperformance, but that's not crazy to me, right? So I have them in that 4 to 8 range, but I do power rank them as 8th, below teams like 100 and IMT. I think I don't like I haven't gone into it for every team, but I do think about whenever I look at any player, I think about in broad strokes what their what their archetype is as a player in playstyle in game, like risk aversion and stuff, and then I think about their champion pool also in terms of like how flexible it is, like split to split, etc. within a split, and I like the last thing I look at is, you know, that's why people have like the last thing I look at is their behavioral, like their personality and their archetype as a personality, right? And so when I am armchair looking at their roster, not knowing any of them that well, but having spoken like a little bit to XU and having like spoken a bit to like Tomo and witnessed Isles in certain environments, it feels weird to me to have their leadership personality wise feeling like it's coming from XU, who I think is like has shown a lot of great work ethic and a lot of good
Hmm.
initiative, but like how do you get his leadership meshing with like Rich and Dove? Like Rich being more quiet, Dove being like chaotic, like Tomo and Isles being maybe on the more quiet side personality wise. Like maybe they end up all being really good friends and they have the power of friendship and they make a top four like regular season run and then like peter out towards the end of the split and try to improve split on split like we did um, with our roster, but I'm not hopeful. And the yeah, like that's a factor that like even if you don't look at the gameplay and stuff, it's like the only way I see rosters where I'm not super nothing's eye catching for me on playstyle or on champion pools or on like pedigree is does something work inherently about their roster building from a like yeah from that standpoint, which is why teams value so much knowing which players want to play with other players. I when I talk to any player will also ask them some questions that give me an idea of like how they worked in a certain environment or behavioral kind of questions and case studies, right? Um, so yeah, I and the last thing for me is I am very confused as well on like what are they doing on coaching staff, right? Like why have they not reached? I know that they haven't because I did try to get landing spots for some of our coaches as
Hmm.
like head coach or strategic, and there was minimal interest if any, um, and I think that I don't know what they're doing infrastructure wise, but even more so than Immortals, you have like Rich has been here for a bit longer. Sure, maybe
Hmm.
his English is better than Castle and Masks, but why do you have Rich and Dove and you haven't announced a Korean coach? Are you going to get
So Papa
someone
Smithy
like
says they added a Korean coach to the GCD
okay?
today.
Was it Joker? Because I know that Joker worked with both Rich or worked with Dove before. They went to LPL together. That would make a lot of sense to me. But like
I'm
Yeah.
going there
that
right now.
yeah, that's a question mark. But yeah, I mean that's a good thing to hear for sure. And it
Guys,
also something Papa Smithy mentioned earlier, which is like FlyQuest is the only team with a European player, is crazy. Like
yeah, that actually is
definitely
crazy.
first time that's ever happened, and they
Yeah.
have 3 out of 3 of the European players in our league. So um, with a European coach, does anyone even have a European
The
coach?
two coaches on there on
Couple.
the GCD right now are Zero and ZZ.
It would be Zero because ZZ is he was the Challengers head coach and then he helped out with LCS.
Yeah.
So Zero would be the one that was added.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Um,
but that's all I have for Dig.
yeah, I will say that I I I kind of find it interesting. You see XU like could be the leader as a rook. I don't know the other players as well, but I do think really highly of XU as a professional. And yeah, I'm hoping that he can prove that. I'm glad you mentioned that too. That's
Yeah.
definitely yeah, he's got really good work ethic that I've
But
seen him
that is why I'm
do.
surprised. Like, that's why I am excited to see like the bright spot for me is seeing how XU and Isles play together.
Hmm.
Um, because the variance on like Rich and Dove's performance for me is like not that high. But
Yeah.
what makes a team like this succeed is the NA talent like rising to the occasion and
Hmm.
you know keeping their imports motivated and happy and stuff. So
Yeah, Rich is good. So that is like one way they could try and win if X2 sets up around top well too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, if Dig follows the trend that they usually have, I don't actually think they did it in spring this year, but they usually start off looking really strong, and this is very much narrative-based analysis, and yet consistently, with I guess the exception of this year, which kills it, they do this thing where they pop out the gate and everyone's like, oh wow, Dig's really good, and then they flop in the second half of the split. So, I don't know. I don't know. It's such a weird league next year in terms of all these different teams, because like when you just look at, and I'll pull it up after whenever we get to the end of it, but you just look up the rosters and you're like, hey, if you were a fan 2 years ago of the LCS and you didn't watch much last year because it was on the weekdays, and like let's say the rumor is true and it ends up being on the weekends, you're like everybody tunes back in. Like the league looks so fucking different, and I feel like Dig is like a huge example of that, as they often are. But
yeah. But I do think that teams like Dig and IMT only benefit from, the
from the
there's
chaos,
just more talent for them. Yeah, there's just more talent for them to pull from, and whether they did that is a question. But like, it is funny that both of the like perceived 7 and 8 teams went for Korean solo lane imports. So it's just seeing if this philosophy pays off when no one else did that.
Yeah.
So,
by the way, as a random aside during that conversation, Papa Smithy pointed out that his team is the only team that has a European player on it.
Yeah, that's wild. There'll be other European coaches because like Mithy, obviously.
Yeah.
But yeah, that is wild.
I mean, that is a crazy
That's probably a first for the
stat.
LCS. It's got to be a first.
I mean, it's
Sharks,
not a first because way back in the day there were no players from outside the region that were here, but maybe the first since Edward. I forget, because Edward was the first import into the league, I believe, if I recall correctly.
But then Bjergsen came.
That's good. Why would you pull from the 4th best region? LEC getting destroyed at Worlds was just
true.
Was the nail in the coffin.
Yeah.
Everyone had European rosters, and then
they just dropped them as the LEC teams dropped from Worlds contention. The players dropped from the penciled in rosters for teams.
That's why
FlyQuest just didn't get the memo.
Dropped out because they had already signed European players.
Gotcha. Yeah. Like, illegally, by the way, because you can't sign European players until they just held to their verbal agreements. Let's put it that way. Okay. I will give these Dig posts, this announcement. What did I give the Immortals one? I bumped it up to a 6, but I don't think there was any clever video here, so I'm going to say these are a 5. This is a 5 out of 10 for the Dignitas announcements. Toby, I know you just got here. I'm not talking about the players or the roster. I just mean the like actual method of announcing the players. Because we're back to JPEGs again. But at least they're doing custom art. I'm hoping this isn't AI. Okay. Let's I don't think it is. Let's get into newly announced as of, I believe, today, Shopify Rebellion. So today at noon. And we've got Fake God, Boogie, Insanity, B-Voy, Zazel.
I didn't see that graphic.
Yeah, this is their graphic. We're going to get to the reviewing announcements later.
If Tomio was starting, they would have been Team Glasses, man. What are they doing?
That's so true.
Yeah. What are they doing?
They should have had, instead of everyone's right half of their face, it's like, they combine some of the faces. So it's like left, right, left, right.
Yeah. Yeah. Then you have one half face sitting at the end, Croissant, because you have 2.5 faces.
Yeah. I just want to point out that in MNS's tweet thread, he said that one really nice thing about Fake God and his mom's cooking. So this is the Fake God redemption arc.
Yeah.
Yeah, I asked Revan, who's their coach, I was like, can you hook me up with food from Fake God's mom? And he was like, I'm already trying to see if I can get that for myself.
That needs to be an LCS skin at some point in time. I really hope that LCS makes content about Fake God's mom's cooking. Never references the M&S Dunzo Manifesto, but I do think that that would be very clever of LCS to try to do something around Fake God's mom's cooking.
It's really funny.
All right, so this is the new TSM for anybody who's been underneath a rug or a rock. Shopify Rebels. And their lineup, again, Fake God, Boogie, Insanity, B-Voy, Zazel. So one thing that's very fascinating is when they first came into the league and acquired TSM, it was my understanding that they had a lot of conversations with a lot of the players that were over there being like, hey, we're here. Don't worry about anything. I think at this point in time, Insanity had already been dropped from the roster, and they like re-signed him or like somehow figured out how to like reverse that process, because I think his initial end date was on TSM's like elimination from Summer Split. So I don't know how that worked, because I don't know if they could have signed him at that. It's an interesting question for Riot, but anyway, so the final iteration that we see is essentially a three player swap, with, I guess, let's see. Oh, it's not. They haven't updated on this chart that I'm looking at. But yeah, Hanser out, Ruby out, Wild Turtle moving to streamer/sub, which I haven't seen Wild Turtle stream, but I don't know. Maybe I can't tell how serious the streamer part of streamer/sub is. I don't know. What do you think, Croissant, of this lineup? I mean, there's some NA talent we're excited to see. I'm excited Insanity's back in the league again after last year, but other than that, what do you think?
Yeah, let me actually see, because they have 3 NA talent, and that would put them alongside us as the only team to have 3 North American players, which is cool. I have. So the main thing I saw for this roster jump out is like, okay, Fake God in for Haunter, that makes a lot of sense. Like, that's expected. Boogie and Sanity retaining, that can definitely be argued as their main driving like success. Anytime they did well, it was shining from these roles. Oh, C9 with 3 NA? Oh yeah,
Vulcan.
sorry. I
He's French Canadian, but it
I don't
technically
count
counts.
Canadians, unfortunately. No, just kidding. That's my American brain. Sorry.
You're good.
But for their mid jungle expected, top lane expected, Zazel and Chime. I think Chime was like a player that was, um, like as you talked about in those rumored discussions, like Shopify showed interest in keeping him on, but then him being released, and I think like maybe some of his conversations were with like EG and GG, and that screwed him over.
Oh, right. I do remember hearing that rumor that
So
Chime was going to go to one of those teams, but I don't know if he was going to go to one of those teams because because he wanted to, or because he knew that he was not going to be playing for Shopify. So I guess
not sure exactly what happened there, but that's unfortunate.
Yeah,
But
I heard that too.
on Shopify's side, like Zazel having worked with Fake God on DSG, and I think both of them having worked with Revan before, I believe, on C9 challengers, and then Tomio also as a sub. I think all those changes make a lot of sense, and the change that got the most criticism was B-Voy, as like, you know, a player who hasn't played in a major region for some time, or I don't remember exactly like the course of his career, but I will say that from our scouting on Energy side, and also talking to people who've played against him in NA solo queue a lot, I know Apollo played against him. I think there is actually a lot of respect for like B-Voy's peak and what he can achieve, and I have him higher than players like Castle and Dove, even though, you know, those players have come from major regions, playing in major regions more recently. So I'm excited. I have a lot of respect for Revan as well, and so I think that for me, with since they're doing the things that we tried to do in between, like split to split, and they have that core of Boogie and Sanity, and I do think they have like a well-coached team and like a cohesive structure, and they're also merging together like Fake God, Zazel having played together, them having worked with Revan before. Like they see the game in the same way. They're aligned, and they're like they have an underdog narrative. I do think that they could. I place them anywhere from 2 to 6. I don't see them as going lower. I think that things could go well. Um,
Hmm.
and if Fly does go to fourth, it is because us and C9 and you know yeah. So it would also require TL to be dropping below top four, but um, yeah, I like the roster. And maybe they make bigger changes in summer or in the split after that. But yeah,
Cubby.
I'm pretty aligned. I actually thought this roster made a lot of sense. I was kind of with Croissant. Like I thought that maybe bringing in even Meech too could have been an option where I would have been a fan of that. But at least like with a lot of the challengers teams, the joke has been like if you need bot lane practice, use Scrim B-Boy's team. Because like he was in Estrel for a couple years and then Pain. And especially like on Estrel, like it was pretty common that challengers teams would scrim that team, and a lot of it was because like B-Boy and at the time Mia was like they were a good bot lane. Um, Zazel and Fake God were really strong in challengers. Zazel, whenever I see Zazel compete outside of LCS, he's been top 3 in his role, like minimum, from everyone competing. But yeah, I I think really highly of Zazel as a player, and I actually think he'll be like a pretty solid support in LCS. And then what they kept makes sense. The Revan coaching tree as Croissant laid out made sense. I'm curious to see what Tomio gets as a sub. Financially, it's going to be a much better situation for him than challengers, and he has nothing left to prove because he won the last 2 splits. And I think Tomio is a pretty gifted player who needs comp experience still because he needs to like he'll continue to learn. But he did learn a lot last year with Zazel.
Yeah.
And Zazel is definitely a coaching figure on the Rift. Him and Insanity are really smart about the game. I actually have pretty high hopes for this team. Like I actually think they could be like hanging around 3, 4, 5 and be a lot better than I think what they're getting credit for. So I'm aligned with Croissant on that.
I am excited to see Zazel and Insanity here and hopeful for the team. I worry that this org is looking to supplant Immortals in terms of the new bummer org of the LCS. And I think that's a great segue into their announcement of this roster, which is, I think, the worst JPEG we've seen so far. There's no custom art here. There's nothing. And you know what's sad about this? Like, when TSM left, I was obviously happy as a person who felt like TSM was a problematic organization to have associated with the LCS, but also like hopeful that whoever came in to replace them would be somebody who like really cares about the league. And I've reset my expectations in terms of what caring about participation in the league looks like in 2020, well, at the end of 2023, given the economic conditions and all that stuff that we're under. But like since these guys came in, I think they posted a JPEG when they joined. That was just like a letter being like, "Hey, we joined," and then they've done this. And I feel like they took the longest to announce their roster, I guess, depending on how you count like the dig stuff. And they also still couldn't do anything more than this in terms of that. Like, I don't know why there hasn't been a video sitting down with like their GM or their coach talking about why they settled on these 5 players. Like if you are like, they're brand fucking new to the league and they're doing so little to make anyone care about them so far. And it's pretty disappointing. So especially in the world where like, I mean, FaZe has its own issues or whatever, but like, had they come in instead, had I don't know what people were talking about, like Luminosity at one point in time was like a rumored name for the league. Like had we had any of the influencer orgs come in, right? Like Mogul or Disguised Toast, like that stuff I think would have been really exciting. And I so far have just been really disappointed in Shopify Rebels as an org. And I think this roster is like interesting mildly to me, and I'm hopeful, especially for some of the players on it, that they do well. But it's not. They're not really like as an org. They're not impressing me in any way, and I, I would love to see that change. I guess is the best way to put it. All right, let's move on to our second to last team. We have Team Liquid, who are quote unquote running it again with Core, APA, Yon. Then they announced Umpty and Impact returning. And this is a first for Team Liquid in a long, long time. I kept trying to think of the last time that they have not used all of their import slots. And I think a lot of people expected them to not have APA or Yon. Obviously, there's some Team Liquid fans that are like, get these guys out of here or replace them with some Korean player that people haven't heard of. But I don't know. I mean, it's an interesting way. It's a reserved expedition and off season for them, I guess. It is nice to see Impact come back. I just want to remind people that after Impact left, they were not able to like keep a top laner for more than a year. That it became like the defense against the dark arts position, and so after all of the adventures through Alfari and Summit, who is now I guess on Movie Star, and and Whippo and etc. They've now returned back home to Impact, who is quote unquote returned home to Team Liquid. So I think just a funny set of circumstances. But I don't know, Cubby, what do you think?
Any roster with Impact and Core is going to be competitive. I am really glad they kept APA and Yon, because I know that APA was thrown into the fire, and Yon, of course, like after his first year, TL, they talk a lot about hard work. And for me, both those players do work really hard behind the scenes. So I'm really glad that I saw some fans, especially calling for Yon's like to be changed because of what happened at Worlds. But I think people kind of forget Yon and Core were laning really well in LCS. I do think that Yon can make some strides at the later stages of the game, but he has clear strengths to his game, and he worked his ass off this year too. So I'm really glad that TL kept those players. If you're not familiar with Umti, he's really fun. He played on not top tier LCK teams. He is a Jin Air legend, but he was actually like one of the stronger performers on those teams, and he was a big part of the reason that Frederick Brion like won games if they did. So I think that he's someone that like, given he speaks English, I know from speaking with Spawn that it was important for him like in the past to have a roster that can speak English. So I'm happy for Coach Spawn with that, to talk about kind of like the communication points that Croissant's been hinting like at throughout. So I think that this team and Shopify are going to be the two teams that are most likely to push the pretty much unanimous top three that we have. And I'm really kind of curious to see how they play. I do think that they can play really strong early games. And also kind of like Shopify, like it seems like they have pitched early that there is a united front on how to play the game. And I can see that as well with this team. So yeah, I actually thought TL's offseason was decent.
Yeah, I'm also happy to see them like put together a better blend. Not that the like we're looking back, we can see like Harry not panning out, APA slotting in, but then APA slotting in being a band-aid fix, and then like issues getting more and like hard to work through those issues through like an LCS championship run and a world championship, like when you're getting shit on in scrims or whatever. But I think very highly of both APA and Yon. I would say that if this roster can't push for higher heights than like we've seen from them, at least they're mid 80 carry and support, it would be Umti or Umti. I never know how to pronounce it. Not hitting the same ceilings as Pioshik, right? Like I think it's cool that Umti plays like Lilia and he's made certain picks work in the LCK. But are he and APA going to be able to play together with in a natural way, the way that Piotrek was able to make APA shine at times, or vice versa, right? Like, is Nico Viego? That was their bread and butter. Is it going to be in the cards for them anymore, right? And so that's my big concern, but I don't have any concerns about APA like grinding it out and maybe trying to add like Set or other champions that he can enable Umti with. And so there's that. There is the coaching staff change, which I do think is really cool to see Spawn again, like finally get that step into that role as a head coach. And yeah, I mean for Impact, I love Impact and Core. I really wanted them to keep Impact in between 2020 and 2021, but Impact went elsewhere and he won. He won the LCS. He stayed at the top for so long, and so I think it feels very natural to see him back in a TL uniform. Whenever I saw him, I kind of just ignored that he was wearing like an EG green or a FlyQuest. You know, I don't really know. Sometimes their jerseys are different colors, like
Also green, usually, I think.
yeah, green or I'm just thinking of the FlyQuest yellow logo for some reason. I think it's because Anero posted that stupid fucking FlyQuest like thing earlier
Yeah.
on Twitter. But yeah, I have them ranging from first to sixth. I have them bottoming out a bit more than Fly because I have more questions about like Umti and like it's not guaranteed that a rookie gets better in year two, or for APA it's going to be his like second split versus his like Jan's third. But I'd say I expect them to improve more than not. Whereas a lot of fans that did want to see changes there are overly, they just seem convinced that like first year for Jan is like what it's going to be, so
Yeah,
I'm not
I, I, it is worth mentioning that right now APA is like in Korea and has a positional coach with him, and he's already been
who it
like
is?
posting his zero highlights. I don't know who it is, but TL just said they have a positional coach with him. But in the past off season, so when I was in the TL Combine, I was there as a coach, and I remember Spawn saying like, "Hey, like, I think we're gonna take APA, but I'm gonna have him spam like 20 games of Silas Akali because I can't have a mid laner that doesn't play this champs." And APA did it, and like ended up picking up Ari and Akali this past off season, which were like pretty different champs from what he played. So, like, he will work on stuff in the off season, and like hopefully be more equipped for some of the shortcomings that like he knew he had, and like other teams ended up like guessing as well. So, I do think that's good.
Yeah, I'm excited to see this lineup. I think Croissant, we're getting feedback again from you. I don't know.
Sorry.
It's echoing back.
Apologies.
It's okay. I just hear my voice, and nobody should have to hear that. So yeah, I mean, I think that I'm interested to see what this Team Liquid roster does. I do appreciate that it is iterative. I think it is very funny that they still boomeranged 2 players out of the league again. And I guess I'm curious from both of you guys. I think Team Liquid might be the biggest boomeranger out there. What are the chances that you think Umti is still in the LCS in 2025?
Higher than Piotrek's chance of being in the LCS in 2024.
That's definitely agreed there, but I would still not say it's higher than 50%. It's like
Yeah, we'll see. I'm much more hopeful.
actually no, it's a lot more likely because like his English is better and it's going to be a lot harder for him to go back than someone like
Yes.
Piotrek, right? So like he'll want to stay in the LCS, and Summit didn't fully boomerang because he stayed on this side of the globe.
It's a fucking boomerang. When you enter the league and you leave, that's
No,
the
but
boomerang.
he's like, it's not. He hasn't.
It was a crooked boomerang. Yeah, somebody chipped the side of it, and so it didn't fly back the correct way.
I would love to own a real boomerang.
What? You want a real boomerang? I honestly, I should
Sounds
give
fun,
that
though.
to Steve as a gift. I should be like, hey, I know you're a huge fan of these. That'd be such great content. Should send one to every team owner, a TGI branded one.
I think you need a boomerang emote next.
Yeah. All right. Anyway, so Team Liquid, their full roster. I mean, I yeah, it's just actually wild how energy-tastic this decision making is. I think from them,
Mhm.
that's just crazy. All right, I'm gonna give their announcement video or their announcement strategy. I'm gonna give it a 9, actually, because I think it's cool. I don't know if folks saw, but they did a video with Umpty that's on their YouTube channel. I was just playing it on stream, and they did something. They did a little thing with Impact. They used a JPEG for the other three, but I think that's fine. Like, announce the new players in a cool way, and they like did that. Like, the best thing about them is that they realized that, like, hey, Umpty is coming over. Umpty, god damn it! Now you said it multiple ways, and then that I think that they realized, like, okay, we should probably make it so that our fans can like get introduced to him and learn who he is or whatever. And so, um, thank God, pretty
Sticking
good.
with Umpty Dumpty.
They're calling him the
Humpty
General,
Dumpty.
which is just funny for me as somebody who's been around the
Yep.
LCS for long enough to understand what
Yep.
that used to be as well.
Yeah.
But I guess that's an LCK moniker. All right, we've saved the worst team for last. It's fucking NRG. They made a terrible promotion in the offseason, and we're already seeing the ramifications of that with this garbage roster. All 5 players got announced now, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Croissant?
Yep.
Okay, so
Doak was acting this
Go
offseason.
check it out. Our Who He announcement video.
oh yeah, I think I have the who he. Yeah, here it is. Here's the who he one.
Doak could be a stunt double.
Yeah.
Dokes, I'm headed out for the night.
Oh, I've got audio playing, unfortunately. Okay, so the NRG roster is actually Croissant. You name it out. You're here. Why am I saying it?
We have Dokla, Contracts, Palafox, FBI, and Who He. So
What was the
4
decision
players
making between
roster.
FBI and who he is a bot line? Like,
well, like
it's a joke.
they don't really like each other that much, but we were able to convince them to come and play together.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, that's the best way to build a roster, I think, is find 2 people who don't like each other and then force them to play in the same lane together.
Therapist relationship counseling is what
Yeah.
my third job title is.
All right. So give us the reasoning. Did you guys do a video that was like, "Hey, I'm Croissant," or I don't know, whoever, talking about why we built this
We
roster?
will have something coming out either tomorrow or yeah, it should be in the next day or two. And so go check that out when it does. Our last video was like we did a video in between spring and summer, which is actually really funny because I went back and I looked at it and was like, how did things age? And also it was like there's things that I can do better in terms of communicating or whatever. And there were a lot of angry comments. There were a lot of people just like, you guys are fucking idiots for side grading like bot lane and other shit. And um, but our video this time around is better, I'd say. And I had a really good time just like workshopping it with Thomas or ThinkGuard and workshopping it with our content team. So um, we're gonna have like more announcements and content, and our content team does put out, I think, very funny and very consistent like output of videos, which yeah, like this isn't we're gonna keep us there's not like one big announcement so far, but it's been hard because we have so many players all around as well. So but it was cool to have Dokla and Huhi come in for this shoot. So
Yeah. Yeah, and so okay, so you guys did this, but I know you're gonna do sort of the bigger video, but can you give us maybe like a preview of sort of the decision making in building out this roster of 5 people?
yeah, so like our goal was to retain all 5 and run it back, at least going into the off season. And I had like kicked around. I always like all my players know this. Like all my staff is aligned with this too. It is only proper and my job, whether I was a coach or whether I'm GM, to think like what are 2 to 4 options in every single role that would make sense and for what reasons, right? Whether it's like the personality things I talked about, whether it's in-game like playstyle, whether it's champion pool, whatever. And it became clear very early on into our offseason unfortunately ran like really late. But like as soon as we started having these conversations, and as soon as I was offered the job after John left and I took it, I got to work and Ignar, like his main priority, his main goal was to go back to Europe. And so that was something that was just, it wasn't like we couldn't make things work. It was just that's what he wanted to do. And so
He was like, I have waited so many years for them to finally welcome me back, and I spent all this time proving myself so that I could get back into LEC. That's what he said
honestly,
to you?
like it's like he really likes just Berlin, and I'm sure he likes EU solo queue better than NA solo queue. And yeah, like there's a lot of reasons that he has that I'm sure he'll talk about at some point. But I was just like sad to see him go, but then we were able to like there were like maybe 1 to 2 options that we couldn't really pursue at that point in the off season, but like I'm really happy by how we were able to get Huhi to come in to the picture because just like, Blabber or Jojo and Berserker and these players coming together, like for Huhi, he was really excited to play with like obviously Vic again, but also he's actually played with our mid jungle before. And he was impressed with Doko's development over the year, like very similar to like how Licorice had his resurgence, and so who he's familiar with that. He's familiar with like enabling his team. But the thing that we have, I think, on top of like teams like C9, which I hope is a thing that like that's always been my goal, even when we were CLG, and even in our first split of energy, is just being the place that players want to come to, not just because they want to play with like the amazing players that we have, but also to work with the coaching staff that we have. And that's something that I feel like Huhi was bought into. And we feel like he's not, we don't see him like, okay, there's Ignar and then there's Huhi, and one of them is an upgrade or not. It's just Huhi has clear strengths, and he also has some things that he like has sacrificed as a player because of the teams that he's been on, like the coaches that he's worked with, and that's like we just want to help him level up. And if he levels up, then we know that we'll beat every single team in the LCS. We'll go to MSI, and we'll try to make North America proud again, right? So I'm really happy with, like, I'm really excited to work with Huhi because I've always only heard good things, especially from coaches, and so that's always something that exciting to hear because it's not easy to find coaches that say good things about players. Coaches are very like, sarcastic, like what's that word for people that hate life? Oh, pessimistic. Like coaches are
Jaded.
generally like that. Yeah. So yeah, like Golden Guardians, they liked working with Huki. Literally never heard anything bad, so
Yeah.
excited.
I would challenge someone to find something bad to say about Hui in the space, and that's saying a lot. Um, yeah, I mean, you guys won. You got a player that fills the role of Ignar, and like I think it's coming off one of his better years. So I think you guys did your job this offseason.
Yeah.
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 All right. I'm not asking you to rank, but I will ask you, how hard do you think it will be to keep your dominance going into next year?
So this is where I'm just saying, like, I had this conversation with Azale too. What's dominance? We were 9-9 in summer. Like, we have so much work to do as a team, um, and that starts with consistency. And it's like,
So I know you might forget this, but when you ask what dominance, you're focusing on summer regular split. But there was a moment where I have a picture of you lifting a trophy that took place after that 9-9, and then you continued to outperform the entire West at Worlds. So I think that is, I guess, Western dominance at the very least, or dominance in the West, I guess I should say.
yeah, that's fair. I mean, did it feel like our finals definitely felt dominant. Our series against TL was like, neck and neck, one
That was a
game
good
away.
series. Yeah.
And so for me, I really do have the philosophy of there's there's no team that we can beat, but there's also no team that's a free win. And that's why I have teams like Dig and Immortals and like Shopify. I want to heavily consider what has to go right for them and what has to go wrong for us to have a certain like placement, because I do feel like the league is just stronger. I know people feel like because it's contracted, because salaries are a certain way, but the quality of players didn't go down because our salaries went down in this offseason, unless someone can point to like, oh well, we're losing out on this import that would have only stayed in NA for this amount of money or blah blah. It's like Inspired's here, like Whippo, like Impact, etc. So all that to say that I think we're gonna shit on C9. I think we're gonna shit on FlyQuest. But no, it's just my goal is day over day improvement for the coaching staff and for the players, and I don't have like my management isn't saying we have to place between here and here, because like they have very high like hopes and expectations. But for me, I want to go to MSI. I want to go to Worlds. Like I like China. I like Europe. But I'm really really focused on one thing that was really exceptional about our team, but could be like different this split that I'm looking out for is, we did really well in a compressed split because we adapted very quickly, right? We struggled through regular season as we were like adjusting to a new bot lane, but that entire summer split happened over the course of 6 weeks regular season, and then we had, let's say, another month for playoffs. So you have like a 10 week situation there. And the same thing for Worlds. We were in Worlds I was in Korea from November 15th to November 2nd for Worlds, and then I was there for another like 2 weeks, right? But like we did well in those 10-week periods, but if this regular season is longer, it's very easy for a roster like ours, especially like coming back to a lower level of play, to get complacent, to build bad habits. And it's just like we have to see how our roster does in a different format, in a different like kind of environment of competition. So yeah.
All right. Well, we are near the end here, but I do want to just give a shout out to, or do a quick gloss over players who I think a lot of people would have thought would have teams but don't, or they couldn't kind of expect, or were kind of surprised. So just naming out some folks, and Twitch Tech can let me know if I'm forgetting anybody, but Someday, Closer, Doublelift obviously did his video. Sven is a huge one.
Yeah.
What's that? Oh yeah. Santorin retired. Revenge is a bit of a heartbreaker because I've always been a fan of his, and I feel like he only started to finally be in a position to show some of his potential with EG, and then things came crashing down. I mean, Vikla and Prince are leaving, but Spica seemingly does not have a spot. We got Gory, who did amazing. Stixay and Licorice. Like, Golden Guardians had such an incredible year, even if they fell just short at the end. But seeing 3 of those players not in the league next year, it's a bit of a heartbreaker. Treats seemingly gone, and I think he was one of the shining spots on Immortals. People felt he did a great job with Tactical. And then, Summit and Pyosik, I guess, are their own thing. But, yeah, lots of people that are just seemingly teamless. And, like, what's fascinating is, had you kept, 9 and 10 teams in the league, had they sold, had they whatever, you could create a team. Like, let's say you took Licorice, Closer, Gory, Stixay, and I guess you couldn't use Treats in that situation, but one of these players, I guess, support would be tough. You could build like a very compelling roster that I think a lot of people. Oh, Chime is I think the perfect person for that. You could build a roster that I think a lot of people would be really interested in watching and seeing how they did. So, yeah, it's just crazy. I mean, Cubby, what do you think? Hearing all these guys are going teamless.
I mean, I guess we were really fortunate that the news was announced when it did because it was before free agency, and they all had a chance to find a spot before verbals.
Yeah,
Um,
perfect timing.
so yeah, it's too bad. I don't know. It sucks. Like I think that there's been like what I saw from Stixay and Licorice this past split. I think it's great proof that playing and competing in this game, like anything else, sometimes you ebb and flow. And if people are gonna work hard and keep at it, like they can have splits where they're good. And thinking of like how Licorice and Stixay performed as individuals last year, like, and this goes for other players too, like Sven and support, obviously. I really respect that, Sven. But like, it sucks not seeing him in the league again, right? And like, I think that those are guys who are not out of the league because of their play, right? So that kind of stinks. And I'll miss like seeing, especially I love watching Licorice play. I think Sven's got a cool takes on the game. Like I'll miss seeing Sven play. Yeah. We'll see.
Croissant.
Sorry, the question is
Any thoughts
players?
on the players that are not around anymore? That we lost, the players we lost this year that are still in our hearts,
Still alive for sure. But yeah, I mean, I would be excited to see them slot in to continue competing in NACL and streaming, like if that's what they need to do to supplement income or etc. But I can see a lot of them jumping in on teams like Immortals and Dig. I think um, it'd be even interesting to see like, I mean, Shopify could end up with like if Turtle and Tomio both jump in, then they'll have a five NA team, five NA player team. Uh, I think I also wanted to um, talk about like not just players that were affected, but also staff that were
Yeah.
affected in the turnovers, because I think that Mash should be a GM or a strategic coach on a team. I think that uh, Demonte should be a head coach on an LCS team. I think Anero should do what he wants at a team as well. Like a fun fact about Anero is just that I would not still be in the space at all if it weren't for uh, him. Because even after TL, even after like I felt like a strong performance on my end and making it to Worlds and going 15-3 in regular season, like I would not have been able to make it on a team at all if he didn't put me on the map for Golden Guardians. And then from Golden Guardians, I was able to prove myself, and then ThinkGuard was able to bring me to CLG. But yeah, it is. There's only so much that like one team can do at a time, like NRG. And I think that in our announcement tomorrow, we'll talk about like what our staff looks like for next year and the players. But I'm really like, there's the league as a whole needs to make sure that it's properly evaluating like how to build teams, right? And some teams are looking at others to model after, both in coaching staff and for a lot of them, they're making those changes, the right changes for staff, or sorry, for like player rosters, but they have to do the same on the staff side, is what I believe. So.
Yeah. Some quick questions from the chat. I know we've gone really over. I appreciate you guys both being patient, but Abel here says, any LCS updates on format? I haven't heard anything. I assume you guys haven't, or if you have, you wouldn't be able to talk about it. Sebi asks, who's winning next LCS next split and why is it NRG? I gotta say, I think Croissant already answered that to the best of his ability. But I do think that it's going to be, at the very least, C9 I feel like has upgraded, and I think that NRG has made changes as well that may lead them to be competitive, continue with C9 going forward. But I do think it'll be perhaps a tougher challenge for them this spring than it was last summer. We already talked about Dig roster, Oxygens. Croissant, we're still getting a little bit of echo back.
Sorry.
How Mokwa says, how does 8-team will affect LCS long term at Worlds? So, do you guys think that we get the chance to send 4 teams to Worlds next year, which would be 50% of our league?
That'd be crazy, honestly. I think they
Great
maybe
question.
just don't do the LEC versus NA or LCS kind of situation, and they have like um an extra spot go to the play-ins because they're consolidating a lot of the play-ins qualification formats. But I mean, I'll take it if we get it. But
I mean, the tough thing
the only thing I
is,
want is 2 teams to MSI. Like, I think we deserve that still, especially
yeah,
after.
I think we can do that. I think the challenge is it's hard to explain why LEC would get 4 spots and we only get 3 after this past Worlds.
You know, I think 3 and 3, but and then you find somewhere else to get that one slot in, or maybe you do like 4th seed NA, and then there's like a mini like, yeah, you just put them in the play-ins overall. But um, yeah, it's curious.
Looking
Yeah.
to see any other announcements in chat, or not announcements, but questions. I
Yeah.
think we're probably pretty good. Cubby, you were gonna say something?
No, I don't think that 8 teams matters that much, unless they change format. Because I do think that like best of 2 or best of 3 format is like does a better job of prepping teams for what they need when they go to international events. You're just practicing what you're gonna have to use there every single day. Best of 1's a little bit weird.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you guys for sticking around for so long. I know this was a sort of a mega rundown of all the different teams, but hopefully the folks who've been wanting us to talk about this stuff for a little bit, even if you didn't get Mark, we had some really cool conversations, and people can use bullet points to figure out what they should think about their favorite team. Cubby, do you want to do any shout outs or any plugs before we wind down this? I'll stick around on stream afterwards, folks, so nobody leave, but any plugs from you, Cubby?
No, you can follow me at CubbyXX on Twitter and Twitch, and then yeah, I excited to hopefully be a part of broadcast for next year and get stuff going. Only other one would be Aegis. Aegis is the best league going on right now that's not Challengers. So it's Aegis Esports GG, and they're in like top 4 or 5. They have some Challengers players and collegiate teams in there. It's a decent league if you're looking to watch some NA League of Legends right now. Yeah.
Croissant, how about you?
Shout out to Energy. Keep watching our content, and like I want to stay more engaged with the team, with like just the community this year, because I felt like last year I was just really buckled down on like trying to make that miracle run, but now it's important to just give people a clear picture of what our direction is and how we're going to try to stay dominant, as Travis said. But really thankful for my coaches and my players, and also just Energy for giving the opportunity, because I'm so every day I wake up and I go to sleep and I'm just thinking about the LCS. I'm thinking about like Magic, and yeah, just excited for next year and the opportunities it brings. So yeah.
And I will be at the TFT event this weekend, and so will Croissant. So if
have fun, guys.
anybody's attending the TFT Vegas Open, please keep an eye out for us. I don't know how much you'll be visible, Croissant, but I'll be out and about at the very least. I don't know if they put you in some sort of box somewhere where you get to hide out with secret people.
I'm hanging out I'm just gonna be carried around in a backpack.
There you go. Fantastic. But I will be there. I will also actually. You're gonna be. Can I say where you're gonna be with me the following week?
No.
Okay. Well, then now that means I can't say where I'm gonna be the following week.
Yeah.
But
Just don't reveal that information ever.
okay. Well, I will have to promote this at a later time, but I will be doing something somewhere involving Magic the week after. People
The Bermuda Triangle
can guess where it is. But anyway, thank you so much to both Cubby and Croissant for coming on, and for everyone else for listening. Hopefully we'll have Hotline League this week. You know what? If you want, you can scream at Mark and ask him why we haven't had it yet, because I would love to. Let's put it that way. Anyway, thanks everyone for watching, and we'll see you next time.